I entered a loveless arranged marriage until the groom's face exposed the past I really tried to bury, and I never expected this. If you had told me that the time I stepped into a loveless arranged marriage, I would come face to face with the one man I'd spent a decade trying and failing to forget, I would have laughed or cried, or maybe both. But that's exactly what happened. And the moment I realized who the groom was, my heart almost stopped. Before I tell you everything, before I unravel the secrets, the shocking reveal, the hidden past, the emotional story behind why I agreed to a marriage I didn't choose, I want to say this clearly. This isn't my story. It's our story. Mine and Rowan Pierce's. But I'm the one telling it because I'm the only one who lived all of it from the inside. The fear, the impossible choice, the unexpected twist of destiny that dragged me backward before pushing me forward. My name is Lena Hart, and what you're about to hear is an emotional storytelling journey about love, loss, past mistakes, and the kind of second chance you don't see coming until it's too late to run. It's a fictional story, but it could be real. Honestly, sometimes I'm not sure where fiction ends and truth begins. If you're new here on Possible Hearts, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and tell me down in the comments which city or country you're watching from. I love seeing this community spread across the world. Now, let me take you back to the moment everything shifted. It was the day when my past decided to step into my future. The room smelled like fresh lilies and old secrets, the kind that hang in the air before anyone is brave enough to speak them aloud. I had agreed to the arranged marriage 2 weeks earlier, under the weight of family pressure, financial strain, and the unspoken rule that good daughters do what needs to be done. It was supposed to be a forced relationship, a contractual merging of families, businesses, and expectations, a practical choice. A necessary one, not love, especially not forbidden love. I wasn't supposed to know the groom. His name hadn't even been shared with me. Something about negotiations, discretion, and avoiding outside interference. All I knew was the marriage would help my mother's rising medical bills and keep our family home from being swallowed by debt. I felt trapped, but I told myself I could survive anything for 1 year, just 1 year. As I stood there, veil over my face, dress too heavy on my shoulders, hands shaking so hard I had to hide them in the folds of the fabric, I repeated the same thing to myself. You're strong, you're capable, you can do this. Even though every part of me knew I didn't believe a word. My father touched my arm. You ready, sweetheart? No, not even close. But I nodded. The doors opened, I stepped forward. And then everything changed in seconds, because the man standing at the altar, the man my family had chosen, the man I was about to marry without love, without history, without choice, was Rowan Pierce. Rowan, my almost, my never, my unfinished sentence, my past, my heartbreak, my biggest what if. I froze so completely I wasn't sure if I was breathing. The candlelight flickered across his face, the face I had memorized years before without meaning to. Older now, leaner, more defined. His jaw tightened when he saw me. His eyes, God, those eyes, dark, steady, filled with a kind of disbelief that mirrored my own. He looked like a man who'd been dragged through storms. He also looked like a man who recognized a ghost. Me. That moment hit me hard. Every memory I had buried came roaring back. His quiet laugh, the way he used to look at me like he saw straight through all my pretending, the day everything shattered because of a misunderstanding, a moment so small yet so devastating I spent years believing he didn't want me. And now he was the groom in a marriage he didn't choose either. I had no idea what was coming, but I knew one thing. Rowan Pierce was not a coincidence. He stepped forward, slow, like he wasn't convinced I was real. "Lena," he whispered. I felt the world tilt, the walls bend, the air thin. No anger, no rejection, just shock. And something else I couldn't name yet. A tremor ran through me. Don't fall apart. Not here, not now. The officiant cleared his throat. The guests shifted. Someone whispered, and I felt my knees weaken beneath the weight of the moment. This was supposed to be a practical alliance, a loveless solution to a spiraling situation. But staring at Rowan of all people, my chest tightened with something dangerously close to hope, or fear, or both. Because if he was here, if fate had brought him back into my life like this, what else was it about to reveal? That's when he looked at me, really looked, and the expression on his face changed. There was something like pain, something like regret, something like he had been waiting years to say something left unfinished. And before I could understand it, before I could breathe, he whispered the one sentence that made everything collapse. "Lena, you weren't supposed to be her." People say the past is gone, but that's a lie. The past doesn't disappear. It waits, quiet, patient, relentless, like a storm lingering just beyond the horizon until it finally breaks over you. As I stood at the altar staring into Rowan Pierce's eyes, I realized something terrifying. My past wasn't done with me, not even close. His words, "You weren't supposed to be her," echoed in my skull like a warning, or a confession, or both. Before I could respond, before I could even process the shock, my father gently pressed my back, urging me forward. I felt numb, detached, like I was watching my life happen from somewhere outside my body. Rowan's expression kept shifting, surprise, confusion, something almost protective, but beneath it all, I saw a flicker of the same fear twisting inside me. I couldn't look away, even though looking at him felt like reopening a wound that had never healed. Because Rowan Pierce wasn't just a boy I used to know, he was the boy I used to dream about, the boy I almost kissed, the boy I thought had rejected me in the most humiliating way possible, and the boy I ran from. Back then, I was 16, painfully shy, the kind of girl who apologized for taking up space. Rowan was 17, all quiet intensity and soft edges, with a family life he never talked about but couldn't hide. We weren't supposed to become friends, but life had a twisted way of bringing two lonely kids together. We met in the art room after school, my safe place, his escape. He'd sit on the counter while I painted, his legs swinging, asking questions he wasn't supposed to ask, like, "Do you ever feel like you're living a life someone else picked for you?" Or, "What do you think happens if you fall for someone you shouldn't?" He never said much about himself, but I saw it. The exhaustion behind his eyes, the anxiety he tried to hide, the way he'd flinch when someone mentioned his parents. He carried weight, real weight. I'd always wanted to ask about it, but fear kept my words locked inside my throat. Still, we grew close. Too close, maybe. There were moments when his shoulder brushed mine, moments when he'd linger after everyone else had left, moments when he'd look at me like he wanted to memorize me, moments when I thought, maybe I matter to him. But I never said it aloud. I was terrified of wanting too much. That was always my flaw. And then, one day, it all fell apart. It started with the almost kiss. We were sitting on the old bleachers behind the school. I remember the way the late autumn sun stretched amber light across his face. I remember the sound of the wind pushing fallen leaves across the pavement. I remember my heart beating far too loudly, like it wanted to leap out of my chest. He had been talking about his younger brother, Evan, and how hard things were at home. His voice was low, rough around the edges. "Sometimes," Rowan whispered, "I feel like I'm drowning, Lena." Without thinking, I reached for his hand. He stared at our fingers intertwined. His breathing hitched. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and something shifted in the air between us. The world narrowed. My pulse jumped. He leaned in, just enough for his breath to touch my cheek, And then he pulled back, fast, sharp, like touching me had burned him. His face closed off, shuttered, and before I could ask anything, before I could understand, he turned away and walked off the bleachers. I sat there frozen, dizzy with embarrassment, replaying the moment over and over until it twisted into a story that felt painfully clear. He didn't want me. Not like that. Not ever. And the next day, when I finally gathered the courage to approach him, I saw him. With her. A girl from our chemistry class. Pretty. Confident. Everything I wasn't. They were laughing together. Her hand rested on his arm. His head leaned down toward her as she whispered something. They looked close. Too close. When Rowan noticed me watching, his expression changed. Surprised, then confused, then unreadable. But to me, it looked like guilt. Confirmation. I felt the humiliation rise hot and fast. Before he could come to me, before he could explain whatever that moment was, I fled. And that was it. We drifted apart. No, we tore apart. I made sure of it. By the time graduation came, we barely spoke. I convinced myself that I had imagined everything, that Rowan had simply been kind to the shy girl who misread all the signs. What I didn't know was that Rowan had chased after me that day. I didn't see him run through the hallway calling my name. I didn't hear him asking people where I'd gone. I didn't know he had thought I rejected him because his brother had gotten into trouble that afternoon and Rowan had been juggling more than he could handle. He had pulled away from me not because he didn't want me, but because he didn't think he deserved me. But I didn't know any of that. Not until much, much later. Not until the day of the wedding, not until the moment he lifted my veil, saw me, and looked like his entire world had been rewritten in front of him. As the officiant asked us to join hands, I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. Rowan stepped closer. I inhaled sharply when his fingers brushed mine. The same electricity, the same pull, the same impossible familiarity crackling between us. He leaned in slightly, his voice barely audible. "Lena, we need to talk, before this goes any further." My stomach dropped. My father stiffened beside me. The guests whispered. And then Rowan said the last thing I expected. The thing that made every secret from our past suddenly feel dangerously close to being exposed. I didn't agree to this. Well, when Rowan said I didn't agree to this, the air inside the room snapped tight, like a wire pulled to the point of breaking. For a single terrifying heartbeat, I thought he meant me. That he was rejecting me again, publicly this time, right as I stood in front of him wearing a dress I didn't choose, in a ceremony I never wanted, trapped in an arranged marriage designed to fix problems no one bothered to ask if I was strong enough to carry. My throat tightened. My palms went cold. The room blurred as if I were about to faint. But Rowan's eyes weren't cold. They weren't dismissive. They were conflicted, haunted. He looked like a man who had been cornered, not someone trying to humiliate me. Still, the words echoed in my skull like a verdict. My father hissed under his breath, "What is that supposed to mean?" His hand tightened around my arm, a warning disguised as support. My mother, sitting in the first row, pressed a tissue to her lips, fear flickering across her face. Guests leaned in. Whispers started swirling like smoke. And Rowan, still holding my hand, still staring straight into me, whispered, "Please, just give me a second." But the officiant cleared his throat, nervous. We can pause if necessary." Rowan shook his head sharply. "No, I meant..." He looked directly at me, as though silently begging me to understand something he couldn't say aloud. "I didn't know it would be you." Something in my chest shifted. Not relief, no. The situation was far too tangled for that. But something softer, something that hurt, something that felt like truth. I swallowed. I didn't know either, I whispered back. His jaw clenched. His eyes softened. For a moment, just a moment, his thumb brushed the inside of my palm. A small gesture, a familiar one, a ghost of the past. And I felt it, all of it, everything I had spent years burying. But we weren't alone. My father stepped forward, low and firm. This wedding will proceed as agreed. I stiffened. Rowan's head snapped toward him. For a second, the quiet, gentle boy I once knew disappeared, and I saw the man he had become, someone who didn't take commands lightly, someone who had spent years protecting others, someone who didn't bow easily. "With all due respect," Rowan said, voice calm but edged with steel, "Lena and I deserve a moment." My father's eyes narrowed. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not today. But before he could respond, my mother whispered his name, her voice trembling. He looked at her, saw the worry in her eyes, saw the pain. Her health had been declining for months. The hospital bills were part of why I was here at all. My father exhaled through his nose, turned away and raised a hand. 5 minutes. He walked off. The officiant followed. Guests murmured, shifting uncomfortably, but stayed seated as Rowan and I stepped aside into a small alcove near the front, partially hidden behind a column. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my fingertips. Rowan ran a hand through his hair. "Lena, I didn't know. They never told me the name." "Same," I whispered back. He looked at me then, a full, unguarded look, and I felt something inside me crack open. "You look terrified," he said softly. "I am." He nodded slowly. "Me too." There it was, vulnerability I wasn't ready for, and yet it steadied me more than anything else had in weeks. "Why did you agree to this?" he asked. The truth pressed against my throat. The bills, the house, my mother's health, the feeling of drowning in responsibilities I couldn't keep up with. But I couldn't say any of that. So I said the only thing that felt safe. I didn't have a choice. He studied my face for a long moment, as if reading pages I didn't want anyone to see. Finally, he whispered, "Neither did I." I frowned. "Your family forced you?" He let out a slow breath. "My father's business. He's not well. They need partnership, stability, a merging of families." He shook his head. "They didn't tell me who the bride was, only that it would protect Evan, his brother. Always his brother. Is he okay?" I asked quietly. Rowan hesitated. A shadow crossed his expression. "Not really." I felt the words like a weight in my chest. Rowan had always carried more than any 17-year-old should have. Apparently, that hadn't changed. "We can stop this," whispered suddenly, voice tight. "If you want. Lena, say the word. We can walk out that door right now." The idea flashed in my mind. Bright, reckless, dangerous. Escape. But escape always had a price. My mother's hospital bills. The fear in my father's eyes when he thought about losing the house. The sacrifices everyone around me had made just to keep us afloat. I shook my head. Barely. "I can't." His breath shuddered. "Then we're both trapped." Something about the word trapped cut me open. Because he wasn't wrong. This wasn't a romantic reunion. It wasn't fate giving us a second chance wrapped in roses. It was a forced relationship, bound by obligations neither of us had chosen. Still, something in his eyes softened, something familiar, something that felt like the beginning of a bridge forming between two people who had spent years standing on opposite sides of a chasm neither of them meant to create. Rowan slowly reached for my hand again. "Lena, before we do this, before we stand up there in front of everyone, I need to tell you something. Something about that day, about us." My lungs froze. That day, the misunderstanding, the almost kiss, the girl, the moment I ran, the moment everything shattered. My pulse hammered. And then, footsteps approached. My father's voice boomed. "Time's up."
Rowan's eyes locked onto mine. "Lena," whispered urgently, "please, after this, we have to talk. I need you to hear the truth." A tremor ran through me. The truth I had spent years avoiding. And as we walked back toward the altar, toward our vows, toward a marriage neither of us chose, I realized something chilling. The past wasn't done with us. It was just beginning.
The ceremony resumed with a kind of brittle silence, as if the entire room had agreed not to breathe. Rowan stood beside me again, rigid, composed on the outside, but I could feel the tension rolling off him like heat. It reminded me of thunderstorms in late summer, quiet at first, then rumbling beneath the surface, threatening to break. I couldn't stop trembling. Not from fear exactly, not entirely. It was something more complicated, a mixture of dread, curiosity, and an ache I had tried to kill for years. We faced each other, hands clasped loosely between us. The officiant cleared his throat. We gathered today to unite, but the words barely reached me. All I could see was Rowan's eyes that once held warmth, eyes that used to soften when I laughed, eyes that watched me like I was a secret he wasn't supposed to want. Now they were darker, guarded, older, but beneath that, I could swear, still familiar. Still Rowan. He glanced at me, as if making sure I wasn't about to faint. For a moment, our fingers brushed again, not by accident this time. A pulse of something electric shot up my arm. I swallowed hard. "Lena," he whispered so quietly no one else heard. "Just breathe." I blinked at him. He remembered. The girl who used to forget how to breathe when she was anxious. The girl who panicked easily. The girl he once sat beside on the cold metal bleachers and said, "It's okay. Slow breaths. I'm here." Why did he remember that? And why did it hurt so much? The officiant continued through the formalities. Business ties, family negotiations disguised as blessings, words about responsibility that felt heavier than the veil across my face. Then came the vows. Not the intimate, personal kind. These were contractual, pre-written, words I had never agreed with but was expected to speak. "Do you, Lena Hart, enter this union willingly?" Willingly. The words scraped against every bruise inside me. But my mother's pale face flashed in my mind, her tired smile, her trembling hands, the bills stacked on our kitchen counter like a wall collapsing slowly inward. I nodded. Yes. My voice barely carried. A few guests leaned in, trying to hear it. Then the officiant turned to Rowan. "And do you, Rowan Pierce, enter this union willingly?" Rowan didn't answer. Not for a short time. His jaw flexed. His eyes closed briefly, just a fraction, then opened again on me. Not on the officiant, not on the crowd, on me. His throat worked as if swallowing something sharp. "I do," he finally said. But it didn't sound like a vow. It sounded like surrender, a quiet, reluctant one, a vow made because someone else would pay if he refused. Something in my chest tightened painfully. He wasn't here for himself. He wasn't here for me. He was here because of his brother, Evan, the kid he used to talk about in soft, protective tones, the one who clung to him like Rowan was the only safe place he had. Whatever happened in Rowan's life, whatever weight he carried, it had grown heavier, and I was being tied to it. We exchanged rings, cold metal, unfamiliar shapes, heavy with meaning neither of us chose. The officiant lifted his hands. By the power vested in me, Rowan's fingers tightened around mine, almost imperceptibly. I exhaled sharply. He whispered, "I'm sorry this is happening like this." I whispered back, "Me too." Intend I now pronounce you, my heart thundered, husband and wife. It was done. The room erupted in polite applause, but it sounded distant, hollow, almost muted behind a fog of disbelief. Rowan didn't kiss me. He didn't reach for me. He just stood there, stiff, eyes locked on mine, like he was trying to communicate something he couldn't say aloud. Then my father clapped him on the shoulder and pulled him into a brief, congratulatory hug that felt more like a business handshake masquerading as affection. My mother hugged me, eyes shining with emotion. "Thank you, Lena," she whispered. "You saved us." Saved us? I felt my stomach twist. Was that what this was? Saving them? Sacrificing myself? Rowan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "When can we talk?" My pulse jumped. "Tonight," I whispered. "After everything." He nodded once, sharp and tense, as though holding himself together by threads. The reception smelled like roses, cake, and expectations. People congratulated us mechanically, clinking champagne glasses, praising the union, the opportunity, the bright future. I kept nodding, smiling, pretending, all while feeling like I was drowning. And Rowan stood beside me like a silent shadow, polite but withdrawn. He said all the right things, gave all the right smiles, shook all the right hands, but his eyes never stopped tracking me, not possessively, not romantically, protectively, like he feared I might crumble at any moment, and he needed to be close enough to catch the pieces. At one point, during a quiet lull between conversations, he leaned toward me. "You're shaking," he murmured. "I'm fine." "You're not." I looked at him sharply. "Neither are you." His lips twitched, not a smile, but something close. "We'll talk," he repeated, voice low. A few minutes later, someone tapped my arm, a family friend offering a blessing, and Rowan stepped slightly back to give me space. That's when I overheard two men across the room whispering. "Poor girl," one said. "Doesn't even know what she's stepping into." "Neither does he," the other murmured. "That boy carries more secrets than his father ever did." Secrets? The word hit me like a cold wind. I turned toward Rowan, but he was already speaking to someone else, expression carefully neutral. Still, I could see it. Something was wrong. Something big. Something he was terrified to tell me. Something tied to why he pulled away years ago, why he disappeared, why today, this marriage, felt like a desperate attempt to fix something he didn't have the power to fix. I felt it deep in my bones. Rowan Pierce was hiding something life-changing, and whatever it was, it would either break us completely or explain everything we never understood. But before I could go to him, before I could demand to know the truth, I saw someone unexpected walk through the reception doors. Someone Rowan hadn't noticed yet. Someone whose face went pale when their eyes landed on me. Someone who knew me. Someone who definitely wasn't supposed to be here. My breath caught, because the moment our eyes met, I realized they knew something about Rowan's secret. The moment I saw him walk into the reception hall, my stomach twisted into a knot so tight I swore I felt my ribs contract. Ethan Calloway. Of all people. Tall, polished, confident in a practiced way that used to make me feel small without him ever lifting a finger. His presence always carried a kind of cold precision, smooth words, calculated smiles, and compliments that came with invisible strings attached. Ethan Calloway was my ex-fiancé, and he was the last person I expected to see at the wedding where I was marrying another man, especially Rowan. Why was he here? His eyes locked onto mine almost instantly, sharp blue widening in surprise before narrowing with something that looked disturbingly like anger. My pulse quickened. No, not today. Not with Rowan watching. Not with my new marriage, my arranged marriage, hanging by a fraying thread. I tried to slide behind a group of guests, but Ethan walked straight toward me, cutting through the crowd like a blade. "Lena," he said, voice smooth as ever, but edged. I didn't believe it when I got the invitation. My breath hitched. "What invitation?" He lifted a single eyebrow. "The one your father sent me." My heart dropped. Of course my father would invite him. The alliance Ethan wanted with our family businesses was lucrative. Losing me had been bad enough for him. Losing the chance at merging his firm with my father's estate must have bruised his ego far more deeply. Ethan leaned closer. "So this is real? You actually married him?" I stiffened. "Yes." His jaw flexed. "Lena, this is a mistake. You can't possibly love—" "Don't," I cut sharply, surprising him and myself. He blinked. "You threw away everything we planned for." "You mean everything you planned," I snapped. A few guests glanced our way. My cheeks burned. I lowered my voice. "Ethan, please, not now." His expression softened. False softness, the kind that always made me feel managed rather than understood. "I'm just trying to protect you," he murmured. "Your family is in trouble. This marriage won't fix it the way you think." I froze. He knew about the debt, about the medical bills, about the house. He shouldn't have known. Unless... my father. I felt a wave of heat rise in my chest. Shame, fear, anger. But before I could respond, Ethan's eyes flicked past my shoulder and hardened. I didn't need to turn to know who stood behind me. Rowan. His presence settled beside me like a silent storm, calm, controlled. But I could feel the shift in the air, the tension tightening around his shoulders, the way he took a half step closer, not touching me, but close enough that I felt the heat of him against my back. "Rowan," Ethan said, voice suddenly cool, dipping almost into disdain. "Congratulations. Unexpected, but congratulations." Rowan didn't respond. He simply stared. I felt the weight of his silence, the restrained intensity of it. "Do you mind giving us a moment?" Ethan asked, though his eyes stayed locked on Rowan's. "No," Rowan said, before I could answer. The word was flat, final. Ethan smiled without warmth. "I wasn't talking to you." Rowan's jaw clenched, but his voice remained low, controlled. "She's my wife." The sentence hit me harder than it should have. Not because it was romantic, not because it was tender, but because it was protective, the kind of protection Rowan had always given without thinking twice. Ethan's eyes flicked to me. "Lena, a word?" Rowan stepped forward slightly, not blocking me, but shielding me in a way that didn't feel possessive. It felt instinctive. "Whatever you have to say," Rowan murmured, "you can say it in front of her." Ethan laughed softly, shaking his head. "You really have no idea what you've stepped into, do you?" My breath caught. Rowan's shoulders tensed, his posture stiffened, and for the briefest moment, I saw something flicker across his face. Fear. I wasn't used to seeing fear in Rowan Pierce. Not when we were kids. Not now. Ethan's gaze moved to me again. "You deserve honesty, Lena." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Ethan, stop." Ethan ignored him. "Has he told you?" He asked me quietly. "About what happened? About why his family needs this marriage?" The room seemed to tilt. My heartbeat thundered. I could barely form words. "What are you talking about?" I whispered. But Ethan didn't answer. He just gave me a knowing look, one that sent ice straight down my spine. Rowan took a sharp breath. "Lena, don't listen to him. He doesn't know anything." "Oh, I know enough," Ethan murmured. "Everyone in this town does. Except her, apparently." "Ethan," Rowan said again, voice low, trembling with restrained fury. "Walk away." People were staring now. This was turning into exactly the kind of public scene Rowan hated. Ethan leaned in slightly, lowering his voice, but not enough that Rowan couldn't hear. "You think she'll stay when she finds out? After what happened with Evan? After what you covered up?" The entire world seemed to freeze. Evan. The name hit me like a crack of thunder. Rowan's brother. the person he'd always protected, the person he regularly sacrificed himself for, the person he said wasn't okay. I turned toward Rowan, breath trembling. He wouldn't look at me. Not fully, just slightly away, like he was hiding something he didn't know how to explain. Rowan, what does he mean? He closed his eyes. Pain flashed across his expression. Raw, unguarded, unmasked. A look I had never seen on him before. "Lena," he said softly, "please, not here." My pulse hammered inside my throat. I felt something inside me crumble, because this wasn't about business deals, or arranged marriages, or misunderstandings from years ago. This was deeper, darker, personal, and the way Rowan trembled, just barely but unmistakably, told me everything. Whatever Ethan was hinting at, whatever secret Rowan carried, it wasn't just painful, it was devastating. Before I could ask anything, my father approached, clapping Ethan on the shoulder with forced cheer. "Ethan, glad you could make it. Mind stepping outside with me for a moment?" Ethan held my gaze as he followed him out. A silent warning, a threat wrapped in familiarity, or maybe a truth he thought I needed. When he disappeared through the doors, I turned back to Rowan. He finally looked at me, really looked. His voice dropped to a whisper only I could hear. "Lena, I swear I was going to tell you. Tonight, but never like this." My chest tightened. "What to tell me?" He swallowed hard. His next words shattered me. "It's about Evan. Something happened, and I'm the one they're blaming." For the rest of the reception, I couldn't feel my own body. Not my hands, not my breath, not the floor beneath my feet. All I felt were Rowan's words echoing through me like a quiet earthquake. Something happened, and I'm the one they're blaming. Everyone moved around us in slow motion, laughing, clinking glasses, congratulating us on a marriage we didn't choose. But all I could see was the look in Rowan's eyes, that mix of guilt, fear, and something deeper, something like shame. Shame so heavy it bent him. And all I could think was, what could possibly have happened to Evan that Rowan felt responsible for? As soon as the last guest left and the hall stopped buzzing with empty congratulations, Rowan turned to me. "We can go now," he said softly, "if you're ready." Ready. I didn't know if I would ever be ready, but I nodded. We said polite byes to our parents, my father proud and relieved, my mother teary-eyed but hopeful. Rowan's parents were colder, distant. His father shook my hand firmly without looking me in the eyes. His mother gave me a stiff smile that didn't touch her face at all. It felt strategic, like I was a chess piece being placed where it benefited them most. When Rowan and I finally walked out into the cool night air, the silence between us was deafening. Not hostile, not cold, just heavy. The kind of silence that can only exist between two people standing on the edge of something life-changing. We climbed into the waiting car. He opened my door for me gently and automatic, the way he used to hold doors at school without thinking, like kindness lived in his bones even when his world was falling apart. Inside, the air smelled faintly of leather and leftover wedding flowers. The driver pulled away, and the town lights blurred past the windows. Rowan's hands rested on his knees, fingers curled tight, knuckles pale. I swallowed hard. "You said they're blaming you for something." He stayed silent for a moment, jaw clenched, staring out the window. "Rowan, I'll tell you," he cut in quietly, "but not while we're being driven around by a stranger." He wasn't wrong, so I nodded, and we stayed quiet for the rest of the drive, both of us suspended between dread and inevitability. When we arrived at the house, that impossibly large, meticulously decorated estate that was supposed to be our home for the next year, I felt a hollow ache settle beneath my ribs. Everything was beautiful. Everything was curated. Everything was wrong. Rowan hesitated at the door before unlocking it. "I didn't pick any of this," he said quietly. "Just so you know." I wasn't sure why that mattered to him, but somehow it did. Inside, the lights glowed warm and the space smelled like cedar and lemon polish. There was a fireplace, framed photos of landscapes, elegant furniture arranged perfectly. It felt staged, like someone had tried to design the perfect life and forgot to include the people living it. When Rowan and I finally walked past the kitchen, toward the back of the house, stopping near a large wooden door, he didn't open it. He just stood before it, shoulders pulled tight, breathing shallow. "What's in there?" I asked gently. His hand hovered near the doorknob. "My office," he murmured, "and some things I didn't want you to see before we talked." My heart kicked against my ribs. Fear, curiosity, dread. He finally turned to face me. "Lena," he whispered, voice cracking just slightly, "I swear I never meant for you to be dragged into this." "Into what?" I asked. His throat tightened visibly. "The fallout from what happened with Evan." Every part of me felt like it was trembling. "What happened to him, Rowan?" He inhaled sharply, like he had been holding his breath for years and had finally run out of air. He walked to the large living room, sank onto the edge of the sofa, then gestured for me to sit. I did, slowly, close enough to hear his breathing, close enough to see how deeply this hurt him. Rowan rubbed his hands together, palms trembling. "I should start from the beginning," he said. "When we were younger, before you and I drifted apart, Evan was already struggling. Struggling. The word felt too small for the pain etched into Rowan's voice. He was anxious, easily overwhelmed. My parents weren't patient with him." Rowan swallowed hard. "He depended on me for everything. I was the one who picked him up from school. I was the one who stayed with him when he had panic episodes." I nodded gently. "I remember. You talked about him all the time." A flicker of emotion crossed his face, something bittersweet, remembering a time when we were close enough to share things. Then it faded. "Last year," Rowan continued softly, "he got involved with the wrong people, kids who pretended to be his friends, kids who wanted something from him. What did they want? Money, access, leverage." His voice turned sharp, bitter. He didn't understand what was happening until he was trapped, and when I stepped in to get him out, things escalated. He paused. My heartbeat quickened. "Escalated how?" I whispered. Rowan took a deep breath. "They threatened him, cornered him one night outside a convenience store." His eyes dropped. "I got there in time, but it turned into a fight." A chill ran through me. You fought them?" "I didn't think," he whispered. "I just reacted. One of the boys fell, hit his head on the curb." My stomach twisted. He lived," Rowan said quickly, "but his family blamed me, spread rumors, accused me of covering things up, said I endangered Evan, said I was violent, dangerous." My eyes widened. "That's not true." He let out a humorless laugh. "Truth doesn't matter when people need someone to blame. And my parents, they didn't want the scandal touching their business, so the marriage arrangement was their solution. An alliance, protection, a way to bury the story." My breath trembled. "And you agreed?" His eyes finally met mine, haunted, raw, desperate. "They said if I didn't, Evan would end up in a facility, that they'd pull him out of his therapy program and send him somewhere worse, somewhere he wouldn't survive. I couldn't let that happen." I felt the weight of his confession crash over me. Rowan hadn't agreed to this marriage because he wanted to. He had agreed because he was saving his brother, just like he always had. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed. He whispered, "I know this is a disaster. I know it's unfair to you. And if you hate me after hearing this, I'll understand." I opened my eyes. "Hate you?" I breathed. Rowan, this isn't your fault. He shook his head. You don't understand. This story isn't over. Those families, the rumors, the blame, they didn't stop. They just shifted. And marrying you put you in the middle of it. In the middle of what? His voice dropped to a whisper so low I barely heard it. Of a problem that won't go away. Before I could speak, a loud knock echoed through the house. We both jerked toward the front door. 3 heavy knocks. Rowan froze. No, he whispered under his breath. Not tonight. Another knock. Harder. My pulse skyrocketed. Rowan, I whispered. Who is that? He swallowed hard. It's them.
The knock echoed through the house again. Louder, sharper, carrying a weight that made my pulse stutter. Rowan stood perfectly still. Too still. Not frozen in fear, frozen in recognition. He knew exactly who was behind that door, and whatever it meant, he wasn't ready for me to see it. My voice came out in a whisper. Rowan, who's them? He didn't answer at first. He just turned toward me, eyes dark, conflicted, desperate. Lena, he said, voice low, I need you to trust me, no matter what happens next. My heart slammed against my ribs. That sounds like you're about to do something dangerous. He exhaled through his nose, jaw tense. I'm not. I just... Bang! A third knock, stronger, impatient, echoing through the hollow spaces of the house like a threat. Rowan flinched. I have to answer it, he murmured. What if... I'll handle it. The certainty in his tone wasn't bravado. It was burden. The same kind he had carried his whole life. But I wasn't 16 anymore. I wasn't going to run. Not from him. Not from this. I'm coming with you, I said. He turned sharply. Lena, no. I'm your wife now, by circumstance or not, I whispered. And whatever this is, you don't face it alone. A flicker of something crossed his expression, a bruise-softened mixture of shock and something dangerously close to tenderness. He closed his eyes for a second, breathed in slowly. Okay, he whispered hoarsely. Stay behind me. We moved together toward the front door. The hallway felt impossibly long, every step stretching time, stretching breath, stretching the tension between us. As we neared the door, voices murmured on the other side, low male whispers, urgent. Rowan stopped just inches away, shoulders squared, breath shallow. Then he opened it. The night air rushed in, cold and sharp. 3 men stood on the porch. I recognized 2 of them immediately, the same boys Rowan had mentioned, older now, but still carrying that familiar recklessness in their eyes. The third man I didn't recognize. Older, hard, suit pressed, jaw clenched, expression cold enough to freeze bone. Ethan Calloway's older brother, Daniel, a lawyer, a shark, a man known for making problems quietly disappear. And here he was, on our doorstep, on our wedding night.
His gaze flicked to me, then back to Rowan. So it's true, Daniel said. You married her. Rowan didn't respond. He didn't have to. The silence was an answer of its own. Daniel sighed through his nose. A marriage won't protect you from responsibility. Rowan's fingers curled slightly at his sides. What do you want? Rowan asked. Daniel stepped forward. We want you to stop pretending you weren't responsible for what happened. My heart jumped. Rowan told me what happened, I said quietly, stepping out from behind him. Rowan stiffened, but I didn't back down. Daniel looked at me, and something like amusement flickered through his eyes. Did he tell you everything? Yes, I said firmly. He fought to protect his brother. Daniel's mouth curved in a cold, sharp smile. No, that's the part he wants you to believe. Rowan inhaled sharply. Daniel, no. Daniel said, lifting a hand. She deserves to know the truth. My stomach twisted. What truth? Daniel's eyes locked onto mine. Evan wasn't just pushed into danger by those boys. He was involved with them because of Rowan. Shock punched the air from my lungs. No, I whispered. I looked at Rowan. He went still, completely still. "Don't," he said quietly. "Don't twist this." Daniel ignored him. "He didn't tell you that he introduced Evan to them in the first place." My jaw dropped. Rowan's expression broke open, pain flashing so quickly I almost didn't catch it. "That's not what happened," Rowan said, voice shaking. "Evan followed me." Daniel cut him off, voice slicing through the night. "Your brother idolized you. You knew that, and yet you still allowed him into situations he shouldn't have been anywhere near." "That's not fair," Rowan said, stepping forward. "You know the truth. You know—" "What I know," Daniel snapped, "is that your negligence put 3 families at risk, and now you think marrying into another respectable family will sweep it away?" My heart hammered. This was spiraling, dangerously, unfairly, heartbreakingly fast. Rowan's breathing turned uneven. "Leave," he said, voice low, trembling with restrained anger. "Now." Daniel stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "Or what? You'll start another fight?" The accusation hit like a slap. All 3 boys behind Daniel stiffened, watching Rowan like prey watches a predator, fearful yet vindictive. I couldn't stay silent. "Stop," I said sharply. "Whatever happened, he protected his brother. You're blaming the wrong person." Daniel looked at me with an unsettling, almost pitying expression. "You think you know him, but you don't. No one does." Rowan's breath hitched. "Daniel, please, don't do this. Not to her. Not to her." My chest tightened. My throat burned. Daniel ignored him again. He reached into his jacket. Rowan's body shifted instantly, protectively, blocking me from view. But Daniel wasn't pulling a weapon. He pulled out a thin envelope. He held it toward Rowan. "Evidence," he said coldly, "of everything you caused, everything you tried to hide." Rowan didn't take it. His hands stayed at his sides, trembling. Daniel exhaled. "Your marriage won't shield you. Your name won't shield you. And when this comes out," he paused, eyes flicking to me, "she'll suffer the most." My stomach twisted. "That's enough," I whispered, voice trembling. Rowan stepped in front of me, voice breaking. "Please leave." Daniel sighed, almost disappointed. "Consider this a warning. Your time is running out." He turned. The boys followed. The porch light flickered as they walked away, shadows stretching across the driveway like long black scars. When they finally disappeared into the night, Rowan closed the door, locked it, then leaned against it like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. His head dropped, his shoulders shook. "Rowan," I whispered, stepping closer. "I didn't want you to hear it like that. I didn't want you to see me like this." I swallowed hard, my chest aching. "You didn't do anything wrong." His breath faltered. "You don't know that." I reached out, fingertips trembling, and touched the back of his hand. His skin was cold, his breathing uneven. He whispered, "Lena, they're right." My chest tightened painfully. "What do you mean?" He lifted his head slowly, and the look in his eyes, raw, devastated, pleading, tore me open. Because all of it, everything that happened, everything Evan suffered, every mistake, his voice broke. It was my fault.
Rowan didn't move after the confession. He stood there, shoulders hunched, eyes hollow, as if the weight he'd been carrying for years had finally broken through the surface and left him exposed. And for the first time that night, I wasn't afraid. Not of the arranged marriage, not of the threats, not of the future. I was afraid of how long he had been holding all of this alone. I swallowed, stepped closer, and placed my hand gently on his arm. "Rowan, look at me." He hesitated. Then he lifted his eyes. And I swear, if heartbreak had a face, it would have looked like his. Raw, vulnerable, half shattered. "Everything that happened to Evan," he whispered, "it started because I couldn't be in 2 places at once. He followed me that night because I left him alone. I thought he'd be safe. I told him I'd be right back, but I got caught up, trying to fix something at home, trying to keep the peace, and when I got there, they were already cornering him. His voice dropped, barely audible. If I had gotten there 2 minutes earlier, none of this would have happened. That kid wouldn't have fallen. Those families wouldn't have blamed me. Evan wouldn't have spiraled. He swallowed hard. And now you're tied to all of it because of me. I breathed in slowly. Rowan, that's not your fault. He shook his head. You don't understand. My parents told me I should have tracked him better. The boys' families said I escalated the fight, and now the Callaways are trying to use all of it to destroy my name. And you, his voice cracked, you don't deserve to be dragged into this. No, I said softly. You're wrong. His brows pulled together, confused. I stepped even closer until my shoulder nearly brushed his. You didn't drag me into anything. Life, circumstances, family pressure, fear dragged me, but you didn't. He looked like he didn't dare to believe me. I continued, voice steady. And even if you made mistakes, you were a kid, Rowan. You were 17. You were trying to protect someone. You acted out of love. His breath hitched. And love, I whispered, is never something to be ashamed of. He closed his eyes, jaw trembling. When he opened them, something inside him had shifted, just slightly. A crack in the armor, a softening, a letting in. Lena, he said quietly, I don't know how to be a good husband to you. I don't even know how to be good for myself. I let out a shaky breath. Maybe that's not what we need right now. What do you mean? I mean, maybe we don't have to pretend, not to each other. His eyes softened. For the first time in my life, I'm not running away. And for the first time in yours, you don't have to stand alone. His breath trembled. Why would you want to help me? After everything? I smiled gently, sadly, because I know what it feels like to think you're a burden. His eyes flickered. A quiet recognition. You always thought you were too much, he said softly. And you always thought you weren't enough, I whispered back. We stood there in the dim, warm light of the hallway, two people with broken edges that strangely fit together. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Rowan asked, barely audible, Are you sure about staying? I didn't hesitate. I reached for his hand. His fingers tensed, then slowly intertwined with mine. Rowan, I whispered, I'm not staying because of guilt or obligation or the marriage contract. Then why? I lifted his hand gently. Because light doesn't choose where it falls, but darkness chooses where it hides. I exhaled softly. You've been hiding too long. His breath caught. He stared at me like he was seeing something he didn't know he was allowed to hope for. I want to help you, I murmured. I want to help Evan, and I want us to try. Not because we have to, but because maybe, just maybe, the past brought us back for a reason. A long, trembling silence. Then Rowan whispered the closest thing he'd ever said to a confession. You were the only place that ever felt like home. My chest tightened painfully. Slowly, gently, I cupped his cheek. He didn't pull away. He leaned into my hand like he hadn't been touched softly in years. Rowan, I breathed. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. His eyes glistened, not with weakness, but with a kind of surrender only a strong man finally lets himself feel. He turned his hand, threading his fingers more firmly with mine. Levi no e kem carega poco, I whispered, remembering my mother's words. Levi e kem now desiste. He stared at me, stunned. Then something inside him broke, not painfully, beautifully. He exhaled like he had finally found air after drowning for years. Lena, he whispered, voice shaking, I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to.
We didn't kiss, not yet. It wasn't the right moment. What we shared instead was something deeper, a promise, a beginning, a quiet agreement that healing would not be rushed or forced or demanded. It would be chosen, together.
2 weeks later, Evan sat beside me on the park bench, smiling, really smiling, as Rowan talked to a therapist across the path. The sun cut through the trees in warm stripes, painting the water with gold. Evan nudged me. "Thank you for helping him." I smiled. "He helps himself. I just remind him he's allowed." Evan looked at Rowan, then at me. "He's different with you." "Different how?" "Lighter." My throat tightened. When Rowan finished talking, he walked toward us, hands in his pockets, expression softer, more at peace. He sat beside me. Not too close, not too far, just enough to feel warm. The wind rustled the leaves above us. Rowan looked at me with that quiet, steady gaze I had once loved so much it scared me. "Lena," he said softly, "I thought destiny took you from me years ago." I smiled. "And now?" He reached for my hand, slowly, reverently, as if asking permission. I gave it. His fingers slid between mine, grounding me with a warmth that felt like belonging. "Now," he whispered, "I think destiny was waiting for us to stop running." My breath trembled. And then he said the line I will never forget. "Some people aren't almost. They're the possibility you weren't ready to believe in." I leaned my head gently against his shoulder, and for the first time in my life, I felt chosen. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, please remember to like the video, subscribe to Possible Hearts, and tell me which city or country you're watching from. I love hearing where our stories travel. Until next time, real stories, real hearts, real possibilities.